All right, so who is Judas? I just have my Bible out this time. And yeah, I'm kind of done. Well, for now, I feel like I'm done making gaming videos. I'm kind of bored of gaming. I'm getting more bored of it. But something else about me is I'm a history, philosophy nerd. At least I used to be. I haven't done much reading recently, but I've started up again. But specifically, biblical history was what I always liked because, spoiler alert, I'm a Christian, definitely a believing Christian, and it's always been a big thing for me. And I like researching, I like debating too, so I'm sure having a gaming channel means I have all sorts of audience. So if you disagree with my views, I don't think you're right, but I'm not gonna pretend. But I'm not gonna lash out or anything. You can feel free to say you disagree or say why I'm wrong. And I used to do ad. I'm not on social media much anymore, but when I used to be on these religious debate groups and stuff like that, mostly between like Christians and atheists. I know. But I've also debated Muslims and even Buddhist Hindus before. And I would just say, I don't care what you say about me. But if I see like debates starting in my comments and it's like people lashing out at each other, not just me, then yeah, I'm going to start cracking down, deleting, blocking. Like, no, I don't want to see that kind of behavior towards others. But honestly, I don't really care what you say about me, though. Anyway, getting into this now. So I've kind of already set the stage. Yes, I'm a Christian, conservative Christian, if you want to say it. I believe Jesus. I believe he lived. I believe he existed, as do most scholars, I would say. But obviously, most don't believe every doctrine of Christianity. But most do believe he existed, and also most believe Judas existed. And the reason for that is because it just makes no sense for the four gospel writers of the Bible, the New Testament, to make up a story about this great teacher, this great, doing miracles. The two big things about Jesus are really three. The biggest thing was his crucifixion and his resurrection. But the next two big things during his earthly ministry was, of course, all sorts of miracles and then all sorts of great teachings. And because of that, it just wouldn't make much sense for, I would say, writers, even in like people trying to fabricate history, even in today's time, but especially in that time, with lots of stories about like Apollonius, Socrates, great philosophy teachers, as well as sometimes great miracle workers who were also teachers. It makes no sense to make up a story about them where one of their closest disciples betrays them, because that just ruins some of your arguments. It gives your enemies, your opponents, fuel. Why would you want to give your opponents fuel against you? Then they can say, hey, even his closest followers didn't believe in him. So that's just to give you a Cliff Notes version of one of the reasons I remember studying this years ago, and you start doing it again. But yeah, most scholars I remember reading, no matter their background, believe Judas existed and betrayed Jesus, for that reason. But who was Judas? Like, the Gospels are all short. They don't tell you much about him. Who was he really? And that's what I want to go into. I want to go into why did he betray Jesus? Because I would say both sides have it wrong. I don't mean both sides like Christianity itself is wrong about, or the Gospels are wrong. I do think there's a certain section of fellow believers, fellow Christians, brothers and sisters in my faith, that believe Judas was like this, what image am I trying to think of? This is a stream of consciousness that you're hearing from me. Like the guy who, what's that like cartoon villain? The cartoon villain on the train track with the woman tied down with the big mustache, twiddling and saying hee hee hee, like I'm greedy, Satan's inside me, I'm betraying Jesus, because, those are three things we do know that the Gospels do make clear about Judas. And it makes clear, like, the Gospels don't mince words. They make it clear that Judas was lost. That, like, Judas does not have a happy ending. They make that clear. Jesus himself in the Gospels says it would have been better for Judas, for his betrayer, to have been never born than to what will happen to him, which can give you an idea of what happens to him. I mean, in the Gospels, we know he dies, but also, again, I believe in heaven and hell too. But for that reason, there's a lot of Christians I know who believe Judas was just nothing but a thief, and that's all he was good for. That's all he was known for, rather. But I want to read something to you right now. We're going to dive into it now. So this is Matthew 10. This is the introduction to the 12 apostles. And he called to him, this is Jesus, his 12 disciples, and gave them authority over unclean or demonic spirits, to cast them out, and to heal every disease and every affliction. The names of the 12 apostles are these: first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, "Go nowhere among the Gentiles, and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You received without pain, give without pay. Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. And whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it, and stay there until you depart. As you enter the house, greet it, and if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet when you leave that house or town. Truly I say to you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town." And he goes on more about, "Behold, I'm sending you as sheep as midst and wolves. Be as wise as serpents." He's still talking to them about their journey he's sending them on. So what does this tell you? Judas is named as one of the 12 apostles. We know that he stuck with Jesus all the way up till the passion and the crucifixion. He stuck with them all the way almost till the end. And, there's passages, I think, in Matthew or one of the Gospels where there's lots of other disciples who had been with Jesus a while too. And after Jesus says some, in their view, strange teachings, a bunch of his followers then just get up and leave. They don't want anything to do with Jesus anymore, except the 12. And the writers make that clear. And that included even Judas. Now let's look at this. This is when Judas betrays him. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. And later on, I think it's John's Gospel, who says Satan entered him when he gets to the Last Supper. And, this is when Jesus says that he will betray him. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful, and began to say to him one after the other, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He said to him, "You have said so." Now let's skip to when Jesus was betrayed. So this is again talking about Judas. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. So, I think there's a couple other passages I could have gone into, but I don't have time to go through everything. But suffice to say, there's very little said about Judas, in all four Gospels. But to be fair, there's very little said about any of the disciples besides like Peter, John, I think James too. Even James doesn't have much. That's because the Gospels are short. They're trying to get to the main points. But they still make a point to say who betrayed him and give a few notes about what he was like. He was still among the 12. But what do we learn? We learn Judas not only stuck with Jesus all the way till that point, but he did miracles. He cast out demons. It says in that first passage that Jesus gave him authority to do that stuff. So we know, and to preach the gospel. So Judas was a preacher. Judas went out and preached. He was among the 12 when they were going out and preaching. It said Jesus gave all of them authority to cast out demons and heal and perform their own miracles. So Judas did all that stuff too. This is something I think a lot of everyone really, but even Christians too, gloss over this fact about him. That even the four Gospels mention this about him. Now, Judas betrays Jesus. And all we know is that he says he was looking for an opportunity. Okay? But then, when he betrayed him, when he betrayed him and he saw that he was condemned. This is right after the trial, or right after they deliver him into this. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It was right after Jesus' trial with Caiaphas, the high priest, and the council, where they determine he's blasphemous, condemn him to death, deliver him to Pilate. That's when Judas regretted what he did, and said specifically he changed his mind, about him. Now, what does that tell you? This is what it says. This is what it says, I would say, with certainty on this point. It says Judas did not think Jesus would be condemned when he betrayed him. He was expecting something else to happen. That's what it tells you. That Judas betrayed him thinking something else would happen. And this is even after Jesus sorrowfully told him he would betray him. He asks him if he would. He says it is. And then he goes and does it. Almost like, I would say, implying that Judas thought it was his mission to do it. Because he goes and does it, and then suddenly he sees the result and he's like, wait, I didn't do this. And then he says he condemned an innocent man. Now, the rest I'm about to tell you is my own, I would say, historical theory behind these words. But I will say with certain, what we know with certainty from the Gospels is Judas regretted what he did. Yes, but that means he had to have thought something else would happen. And what was that something else? Well, throughout the Gospels, we see all the disciples struggle to understand what Jesus' actual mission is. They question him when he says the Messiah is supposed to be crucified and resurrected. They don't understand that. The Messiah who came to save Jews from the Romans, would then be crucified by the Romans. That makes no sense. It made no sense in that time period. That's another reason why most scholars believe Jesus was crucified. Not for many reasons, actually. Virtually every source we have in and out of the Bible says he was crucified by Pilate. Also, it's a story, once again, wouldn't make sense for some fictional author to make something up like this about a Jewish Messiah. And another reason, that was just not we have many documented beliefs about the Messiah in that time. Some of them are definitely contradictory, but they all agree on one thing, which is that the Messiah, whether he was supposed to be a peaceful, priestly kind of teacher or a conquering, violent warlord, all of them agreed on one thing, which is that the Messiah, in a very physical way, while he was on the earth, was going to show some victory over the oppressor. Israel was going to have a physical kind of victory over Rome somehow. They just disagreed on what that somehow was. But the Messiah physically being crucified by him and literally dying too, that made no sense to any of them. And you see that constantly in the Gospels. That's true in the Jewish documents of that time. If you read Josephus, the Talmud, the rabbinical literature, I read all of Josephus. It's been a while though. I've definitely forgot some. It was years ago, but I read all of his Antiquities of the Jews and War of the Jews, and you see like there's different messianic both people. Not actually a lot of people claiming to be the Messiah themselves, but messianic kind of like John the Baptist, similar to the Gospels, people trying to claim that they're bringing about the messianic kingdom somehow. That's what Josephus narrates a lot about, many people doing that in that time. And, all of them had some sort of physical victory in mind for the nation of Israel against Rome. That's what it was about. And you see that in the Gospels. I mean, one of the apostles, Simon the Zealot, that meant he was basically, a rebel in that time against Rome. So we know all of the disciples struggled with Jesus' teachings about the Messiah. And that's why I think Judas, this is my theory now, Judas, I think, convinced himself that Jesus had to be some kind of Messiah that was going to just, again, physically conquer Rome somehow. Why did he betray him? This is my speculation, but I think it's backed by, I would say, evidence of just knowing the time period and reading what we say, and we know he had a different idea of what would happen, even though we can't know for certain if it was this idea, but I'd say it was pretty accurate probably, is that Judas thought when he betrayed Jesus that Jesus was going to maybe suddenly show all his glory to everyone and conquer and either slay the priests, slay all the Jews in front of him and the Romans in front of him and just take his throne, or awe them into submission and peacefully, by showing his glory and bringing the angels somehow, taking it up. That's what Judas, I think, convinced himself would happen. We know he was a thief. We know he was greedy, but that doesn't define everything about a human being. It doesn't mean Judas didn't genuinely think there was something about Jesus that intrigued him, that made him want to keep following him. We know he did miracles. We know he had to be close with Jesus, and Jesus was very sad about what he knew was going to happen to him. So that's my theory. And if you ever watched the show The Chosen, I'm starting to think in season 5 that they're going to do this too. I think that's exactly what Judas is going to wind up doing. And that's a good show, by the way. I highly recommend it. It's very well produced, well acted. Great portrayal of the Gospels and the disciples, the apostles, and Jesus. And I also think I can tell it's like trying to dig on some of the historical parts of it too, trying to actually, well, I think all of it's historical. I just mean historical, parts of the culture, trying to explain certain sections of the Gospels that are omitted, taking liberties, but giving something that I think is plausible, at least, that could have happened. And I think this with Judas is plausibly what could have happened. And it would make sense with, once again, the theology, the belief system of the New Testament, of Christians today. Why was he lost? Because he didn't believe. It just gets back to belief, and that's it. Because the Bible, in both the Old and the New Testament, made clear multiple times that every human being is guilty. Every human being has already broken God's law, stands condemned, and Jesus comes and saves us from him. But you have to accept Jesus. You have to believe in him. Otherwise, you still stand condemned. Everyone still stands condemned without him. Let me just, one last thing, take you to the beginning of Luke's gospel. This is talking about John the Baptist's birth and then Jesus' birth. This is Zechariah, who was the father of John the Baptist. It says with Zechariah, can I find it here? Yeah, I'm doing this on the fly right now. Okay, here it is. And Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife has advanced his years." And the angel answered him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I was sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. And behold, you will be silent and unable to speak until the days that these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time. Now, if you go on to Mary, Mary actually does the same thing. You think she does the same thing as Zechariah. She questions the angel that comes and tells her that even though she's a virgin, she's going to give birth to Jesus. Let me see what it says. Here it is. And Mary said to the angel, "How will this be, since I am a virgin?" And the angel answered her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And behold, your relative Elizabeth is in her old age and has conceived a son," talking about John the Baptist. "And this is the 6th month with her who is called barren. For nothing will be impossible with God." And Mary said, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." And the angel departed those. And here is Elizabeth talking. She goes and talks to Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, and she tells Mary, "For behold, when John the Baptist leaps in Elizabeth's womb, knowing Jesus is close. For behold, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. And blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her from the Lord." So Zechariah questions the angel out of doubt. He actually doesn't believe. And for that, he still stands condemned and he gets punished. But Mary believes in the angel when it happens. And then she is blessed. She sings a psalm of him. She's called the most, blessed woman on the earth. That's just one example of many I could bring up. But that's ultimately what it gets down to, is do you believe in Jesus or not? Like Judas, I don't think Judas was Hitler. I don't even think necessarily he was like this constantly maybe he was constantly stealing. That is one thing they made clear to say about him, is that he was a thief. So, I don't want to say that. Maybe he was stealing all the time. But my point is, he wasn't, this evil, cartoonish guy. He was a human being who had reasons for what he did. He was ultimately wrong, and he ultimately didn't believe. And that's why he was lost. Because it just gets back to the heart of the Christian message, which is either you believe or you don't in the end. That's all that matters. Anyway, I thought that was just interesting about Judas. I like this historical stuff. And obviously it ties into my faith and the theology part too, which I also want to just share as well.